The recipe we're making today is banana bread. The first ingredient that we need is 2 to 3 very ripe bananas. So you can tell these are very ripe, they've started to go brown. This actually makes them sweeter when they get like this, so they're great for using for banana bread. The next ingredient we need is 1/3 of a cup of melted butter. So I've used a liquid measuring cup. I've put in butter and then stuck it into the microwave, and then it's melted. You can melt it first and then measure it, or you can measure it and then melt it. So you want to make sure that when you get an eye level, it's in line with the 1/3 of a cup. The next ingredient is 1 teaspoon of baking soda. So I'm going to take my teaspoon, I'm going to stick it in the box, and what I like to do is use the box to level off my baking soda. You can also use a knife. Then we're going to use salt. So this is my canister of salt. It says the recipe requires 1 pinch of salt, so it's exactly what it sounds. I'm going to use my thumb and my finger, and I'm going to pinch them together. And this is the amount of salt that I'm going to use in my recipe. Now the recipe calls for 3/4 of a cup of sugar. You can also use 1/2 cup if you would like it less sweet, or 1 cup if you want it more sweet. I'm going to go with 3/4 of a cup. I'm using a 1/4 cup measure, and I'm going to do 3 of these to get 3/4 of a cup. I could also, if I wanted, use a 1/2 cup measure and a 1/4 cup to get to the 3/4. To measure the sugar, I'm going to put my measuring cup into my canister and have it come out heaping. And then I'm going to take a knife and I'm going to level it off. And I'm going to do that 2 more times. My biggest recommendation is that when you go to crack the egg, that you don't hesitate, that you go for it, and that you crack it into a separate bowl. So you don't crack it into a bowl that already contains other ingredients. That way, if there's a shell in it, you can get it out, or if it doesn't work out the way you want, you can throw it out and try cracking it again. In the ingredient list, it calls for 1 large egg beaten. So I want to beat this before I start my recipe. I'm just going to use a fork to do that. Then we're going to measure 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Again, the key to measuring vanilla is to do it over a bowl that isn't your mixing bowl, so you don't spill in with your other ingredients. Take your time, pour slowly, and then if you spill, it's not a big deal. The last ingredient is 1.5 cups of flour. You're going to measure this the same way you would measure sugar. So you're going to take a 1/2 cup measuring cup, put it into the flour and have it come out heaping, and then level it off with a knife. And you do that 3 times with a 1/2 cup. The first step is to preheat your oven to 350 degrees and to grease a 4x8 loaf pan. To grease, I like to take a piece of saran wrap and grab a little bit of the butter and use that to grease the loaf pan. If you don't have a loaf pan, you can use other options. You could use a muffin tin. I also have this mini loaf pan that I love. Choose whatever works best for you, but know that when you're making these smaller sizes, that it'll take less time to cook. For these, they probably take about 30 minutes, so about half the time. When mashing the bananas, you can put all of them in a bowl. You can either use a fork and squish it against the side of the bowl, that often helps, or you can use a potato masher and squish them that way. Okay, you want to mash the bananas until they're about this consistency, so they can still be lumpy. That's okay. Stir the 1/3 cup of melted butter in with the bananas. I'm going to use a wooden spoon to do that. Add 1 teaspoon of baking soda and a pinch of salt and mix them in. Stir in 3/4 cups of sugar, 1 large beaten egg, and 1 teaspoon vanilla. Mix in the 1.5 cups of flour. Now, chocolate chips aren't in the recipe, but my family loves chocolate chips within our banana bread, so I'm gonna add about 1/4 to 1/2 cup of chocolate chips. That's optional, you don't have to do that, but if you're interested, you can. Now I'm gonna place the batter into the loaf pan, and I'm gonna use a rubber spatula to help get all of the batter out. The banana bread's now gonna go in the oven for 50 minutes to an hour. The key is that that's a suggested amount of time. My oven runs cold, so mine might be closer to an hour, but yours might run hot, so it might be a little bit less. So you can check it throughout the cooking just to make sure. The top's gonna go golden brown before the inside's cooked all the way through. So it's an indication that it's almost ready, but it doesn't mean it is ready. When you want to check it to see if it's done, you can use a toothpick or even like a fork or a knife and stick it into the banana bread. When you take the toothpick out, it will either look wet, which means it'll need to cook longer, or it'll be dry and clean, and then you can take it out and you'll know it's done. I've taken my banana bread out of the oven after an hour, and I'm gonna test it with a toothpick. I'm gonna place it in the middle, in the deepest part. And when it comes out, it's clean. So that means it's cooked. If this was wet or had it looked like dough or batter on it, then you'd have to go in for a little bit longer. When you put it in for a little longer, I usually do maybe like 5 minutes at a time. If it is pretty clean, then do maybe 3 minutes. Now I'm gonna cut this up into slices. It's really good warm with a little bit of peanut butter. Enjoy.